edition of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week is Kansas City a sanctuary city? Is there a solution for Kansas' financial problems? And is there a future for Missouri Democrats? Plus roast and toast. But we're going to start with our Newsmaker segment and focus on the Republican Party in the Show Me State. This is a happy time for Missouri Republicans. The governor is a Republican, and both houses of the state legislature are dominated by Republicans. But nothing, as we know, is guaranteed in politics. Parties are always thinking about and preparing for that next election. So what does that involve? Who does the work? Where does the money come from? To discuss all that, we welcome the new chairman of the Missouri Republican Party. Todd Graves is a former two-term Platte County prosecutor. He also served as U.S. Attorney for the Western Division of Missouri in the Bush 43 administration. He's now in private legal practice in Kansas City with the Graves Garrett firm. Mr. Chairman, welcome to Ruckus.
Thanks
for coming in.
Glad to be here.
So how does one become the chairman of the Missouri Republican Party? Do you get appointed or do you have to run?
Well, a little bit of both. The state committee elects the chairman, but by tradition, the governor of the party in power selects a chairman, and the state committee approves that, and that's what happened to me.
You've only been in this job for a short time. I think you took the job in December, but you've been around politics for a long time. You were a presidential appointee, as I mentioned in the opening of the program. Your brother Sam is a U.S. congressman from Northwest Missouri, Missouri's 6th congressional district. So you've been around. What do you see as the role of the Missouri chairman?
Well, I think the role is different when you are the party in power, which the Republicans are. My role is the agenda, supporting and defending the agenda of the governor and the legislature. The governor has some very clear goals that he's trying to achieve, and that agenda will be. It's not only a legislative victory, but there are also initiative and referenda and other court battles to come, I'm sure, over some of the things that we'll get passed.
Right to work is one possibility.
Right to work, certainly. Tort reform, right to work, there have already been initiatives and referenda filed on that. And so that's something that'll play out over the next many months.
Don't you have to get involved in fundraising?
We do a lot of fundraising. We spend a lot of time in St. Louis. Certainly a lot of the fundraising comes from there, and national fundraising and all over the state, Springfield, Cape Girardeau, many small towns in between. As
we were talking, I was born in St. Joseph, grew up in Missouri, and it seems to me in years gone by, the Republican Party wasn't that dominant in Missouri. It was sort of a 50-50 split. People would look at Missouri as a bellwether state. But in recent years, it seems the state has become dominantly Republican.
It's become much more so. I have that same tradition. I grew up north of St. Joe in a rural community, and my great-grandfather used to give silver dollars to the grandkids, and when they put Eisenhower on the silver dollar, he quit handing them out because he was such a Democrat. So I think our family story is sort of the story of much of Missouri, where people have, for various reasons, have migrated toward the Republican Party.
Well, right now, the Republican Party holds 4 of the 6 statewide offices, 1 of the 2 Senate seats, 6 of the state's 8 seats in the U.S. House have a supermajority in both houses of the Missouri legislature. But in 2018, Claire McCaskill, Democrat, U.S. Senator, is on the ballot. People thought she was in difficulty in 2012 until Todd Akin, her opponent, made an inappropriate remark about self-induced abortions, I guess. Is she vulnerable this year?
Sure,
or next year?
She's vulnerable. But, you know, as the party chairman, I know there's an old saying, it's never as good as it seems and it's never as bad as it seems. And it's that way here. We're going to have to put up a very strong effort for the auditor's office and the U.S. Senate office. I think the current U.S. Senator, Claire McCaskill, is in a vulnerable position, but it's not going to be easy to take her out.
Do you have any names of Republicans who might be interested in that Senate seat?
Yeah, interested about 100.
Can you share them?
About 100. About 100
Well,
names. Everybody's interested. but-
Anybody that you can mention we'd all recognize?
You know, in sort of in modern times, people that end up winning primaries are people that run and gather the support, and you know, it's a wide open primary, and I don't really have an opinion right now as to who that candidate should be. We want to have a strong candidate who's a strong conservative and has a fundraising potential.
How long do you expect to be in this job?
I don't know. It's a volunteer job, and I have a law practice and a family and other obligations. But you know, this is an important time in the state for conservatives like me, and I really enjoy it. I like being part of it, and as long as I think I can help move the needle, I'm going to be involved.
Give me a very quick answer to this, if you would.
Okay.
You're a former U.S. attorney.
Yes.
You're a lawyer. Jeff Sessions has just been selected to be, confirmed to be the U.S. Attorney General. Do you think he's competent? Do you think he's qualified? Do you think he'll do a good job?
Oh, absolutely. And also, he's a former U.S. attorney, Chris
Right.
Christie. Many of those folks were once U.S. attorney. Jeff Sessions will be a great attorney general.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for coming in. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
That is Todd Graves, the new chairman of the Missouri Republican Party. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Denidre Herbert is the managing editor of the Sentinel, a Kansas conservative news service. Gwen Grant is president and CEO of the Urban League in Kansas City. Mike Sanders is the former Jackson County executive, now in private law practice with Humphrey, Farrington, and McLean. And former Kansas GOP official Ron Freeman is a motivational speaker and writer. Welcome to all of you. Hang on while I clear my throat. Now we're set to go. Elections have consequences, and because Republicans control the Missouri state legislature and the governor's office as a consequence of last year's elections, the Show Me State now joins 27 others in approving right to work, a measure strongly opposed by Democrats as hurting the working man and woman. The outcome is not surprising because victories seem in short supply for Missouri Democrats in recent years. Some think that's also true for the party nationwide after the stunning defeat of Hillary Clinton in last year's presidential election and Republicans retaining control of Congress. So should we assume the Democratic Party in Missouri and nationwide are in decline? If so, what are the reasons? And can they be resolved? Let us start with the man who once served as the Missouri Democratic Party chairman, Mike Sanders. Mike, how do you assess the state of the Democratic Party in the state of Missouri and across the nation?
Well, so let me start with one political maxim, and that is that you're never as good as you are when you win or as bad as you think you are when you lose. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. With that being said, I think right now with the Democratic Party, both in the state as well as nationally, this is an historic level of disarray. However, within that disarray, the seeds for a comeback are there if the Democratic Party is willing to pivot and pivot to a message that I think appeals at a national level. You have to really, if you are in the party, if I were in the party today, running the party, I'd have my eye on the 2020 redistricting because of the census. You have to really begin to think about that. If the Democratic Party is going to compete on a national level, they've got to begin to compete with ideas, not demographics, but ideas in rural and suburban areas. The way you're going to do that, historically, the way that the Missouri Democratic Party and the party has done that is through an economic populist message. However, the new player on the scene is a guy by the name of Donald Trump. You may have heard of him. He did an insanely good job of co-opting that message in the 2016 election cycle, and can the Democratic Party pull that back?
So Democrats have to sound more like Republicans.
I don't think so. I think Democrats have to sound like Democrats, but they have to begin talking about the economic populist message, a bit of Bernie Sanders and a bit of Donald Trump. You know, when Hillary Clinton ran, I looked at some analysis of this. 85% of what she talked about was anti-Donald Trump. We just cannot be the party of we don't like Donald Trump. We may not like Donald Trump, but you have to have contrary ideas and a message that you're pitching.
What about the future of the Missouri Democratic Party?
Well, I think there's a lot of work has to be done about the future of the Missouri Democratic Party. I think it's very difficult right now to be a Democrat in Jefferson City, so we've got to figure out a way to reconnect. But Missouri is totally a red state, and I think that, I think Claire is going to have a tough time when she's up for re-election, but I think she's up to the task. She is a excellent politician, and she does well at finding that middle ground and being able to connect with the conservative base in Missouri. And I think she'll.
You think she'll have some primary opposition? like Jason Kander?
No, I'm not sure about that. I don't want to say no about this politics.
what
You
do
never
you
know. But
think?
Jason is raising his national profile. Like so, it's we got
That
to
must
wait
be
and see
for
what.
some purpose.
Yeah, but it may not be just to come back here and run for the Senate. We have to wait and see. With
As a
Jason.
Republican, Denidre, what kind of advice would you give Democrats in Missouri and nationwide now positive advice?
Well, I actually strangely agree with both of you. That, get back to basics, talking about people, real things that concern people, and not just we hate Donald Trump. And I don't know how the Democrat Party does this, but reel in some of the crazies who are setting things on fire. I mean, not in Missouri, thankfully, at least not that I've heard, but in California, they've got people protesting by turning over cars and setting things on fire.
At Berkeley,
They've got people dressed in vulgar costumes, carrying vulgar signs. Normal, everyday people who live in Missouri, especially rural parts of Missouri, they don't want to identify with those kinds of people. They don't want to associate with those kind of people. That's not who I think Missourians are.
But the same could have been said, and I think we did back when the Tea Party was running rampant.
No,
and
Tea Party
hanging-
didn't start fires.
No,
no fires. There were no
but they
vulgar
were
costumes.
They were hanging the president in effigy
no.
and doing all kinds of.
That is
They
a
were
far cry
exercising.
from
One
They
person
were
may have done
violence.
that,
They
but
were
that's not
exercising
the
their
party.
right to free speech.
There's
no,
protests and there's riots, and there's a
but
difference.
that was how
There's
many
a
weeks ago,
difference.
Yeah,
and something
huge
much
difference.
more important to be talking about in terms
All right,
of.
Ron, we're hearing about these weekend, I would say, anti-Trump demonstrations.
Very
That's
much so.
essentially what they are, despite whatever title they're given by the demonstrators. There are those who think this will evolve into a liberal Tea Party on the left. Do you agree?
Well, I think the Tea Party had ideas that people could get behind, but I think realistically, before the election, everyone was talking about the Republican Party's decline. I don't think the Democrat Party is going anywhere. I think they're going to be here. I think what they stand for as a party, there are people that want to support the right candidates. And what happened last fall was the candidates on the ballot didn't match up well with the Republican candidates, and they lost. So they're going to retool. They'll get people with ideas that fit more with mainstream America, and they have a chance at winning elections. And
Final
that's
quick
the bottom
question.
line.
Last weekend, I saw a video clip with Senator Elizabeth Warren, and she said this message to Democrats: no more excuses. She was talking about, Comey and Russia and all the involvement in the election, but she said now, no more excuses. Is that the right approach? No more excuses?
I think it's right. I mean, I think that the Democratic Party has itself to blame in so many ways for what's gone on nationally. I think the Democratic Party has to begin to appeal nationally. We have to begin to look in that direction, and if we don't, it's going to be a very dark 18 to 20.
No more excuses and no more time for this topic. While Missouri Democrats may have problems, Republicans in Kansas have their fair share. In fact, more than their fair share. The newly ensconced editorial board of the Kansas City Star lists a litany of concerns for Republicans running the state now and hoping to in the future. Budget deficits, school funding, a depleted highway fund, and the Kansas Medicaid system. The Star also laments GOP Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins' decision not to run for governor next year, calling her the consensus early frontrunner, a candidate capable of straddling the conservative-moderate divide. So our first question: does Jenkins' decision not to run really have that big an impact on the Kansas Republican Party? We'll start with Denidre.
Mike, it's a game changer. Consider Kansas politics kind of like dodgeball, and you've got all these balls in the middle and all these candidates on the side and all these people watching from the sides. And Lynn Jenkins, they were going to blow the whistle. Lynn Jenkins was going to run to the center, pick up the dodgeball. She was going to be the candidate. The end. It would have been shocking or very surprising had anybody else run to pick up a ball. Now you have everybody on either side considering picking up those, running to those balls when the whistle blows. Everybody from the stands considering it. Random business people, radio talk show hosts. It is a game changer, and it's not just changing the gubernatorial field that we're going to see. I think it's changing all the way down even into local politics. You've got state senators thinking, oh, maybe now I can run for governor or run for senator or for Congresswoman Jenkins' vacant seat. And so they're tailoring their messages and their votes on what they're going to do. And it's not unheard of for somebody like a Carl Gerlach, which I haven't heard this, but a Carl Gerlach
Mayor
or
of
somebody like
Overland
that,
Park.
yes, Mayor of Overland Park, to be considering going onto the bigger stage. So it's a game changer all the way up and down the field. And even on the Democrat side, rumor had it that Paul Davis, the former gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats, was going to run for whatever Congresswoman Jenkins didn't run for. So now the Democrats have a limited bench, but they're going to have to, with all these open seats and all this upheaval, they're going to have to be very thoughtful about how they juggle their resources.
Ron, a few years ago, you were the executive director, I believe was the title, for the Kansas Republican Party. Would that be a desirable job to be in today?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Kansas politics, first of all, anytime the Kansas City Star talks about Republicans, just say, put a big circle and a line through it, because they don't know. It is going to be, I mean, Lynn Jenkins is a, remarkable leader and has been a great Republican there. She's done a great job. So, yeah, she's going to change the nature, but there are plenty of candidates, whether you're talking about Derek Smith or Chris Kobach, Jeff Collier, a lot of people that will be able to adequately step in and fill. So having a good slate of candidates is going to happen in Kansas. You're not going to see any significant change in terms of the House or the Senate. The Republicans are going to win.
But Mike, they've got a budget to deal with, a budget that is deeply in a deficit status right now. Until that gets resolved, won't Republicans face some serious reelection problems?
Look, I think it's a heck of a challenge. Now, if you say $1.1 billion between now and June of 2019 is a challenge, it's an enormous challenge for the state of Kansas. And I look at it even from the business side now. If I'm a business owner looking to come to the state of Kansas, and perpetually I'm looking at massive budget deficits, are taxes going up, are they going down, are they staying the same? It just creates a bit of chaos within the state of Kansas and makes it fairly unattractive from that standpoint. So long as that budget gap is not closed, I think this is a real referendum on Sam Brownback, which statistically is the most unpopular governor in the United States, and that's saying something, right, in the United States with current polling. But with that, I think it creates enormous challenges and pressure potentially for 18 and beyond.
Haven't there been some positive economic signs the last few months in Kansas? I know people will say it's not much, but revenue estimates are being closer to what had been talked about, and
really
they're getting more money.
That's really the problem. It's not that they're getting, they've adjusted how they are estimating revenue, and this is going to be a huge game changer for the state of Kansas. You can't continually, the legislature, they get these revenue projections, and they spend up to every single dime. They don't have to do that. They could spend less, and they don't. They spend up to every single dime. So you have to get estimates that are accurate, and I think that's happening now. I think these deficits that we're talking about are going to eventually, they're going to be smaller than what they appear right now, and I'm not worried. And we're doing better. We are doing better.
And the economy's coming back. I mean, it's not like it's getting better. $24 million surplus last month. I mean, so you're talking about something that maybe we're past it anyway.
Well, now you look at Kansas stuff every day for your newsletter, for your website.
Yes.
And I'm reading stories about Kansas Senate committees meeting and saying we're going to cut school funding. Now, after all of this, for years hearing about the lack of funds for Kansas schools and new people being elected to the legislature, are you going to tell me they're going to cut funding more for the public schools, K-12?
Yes, there's no way they can't, I don't think, but I'm going to say this because I'm a conservative and I don't necessarily prescribe to the same things that some of the less conservative Republicans subscribe to. Those less considerate, those moderates are going to be the ones who make the cuts, which is ironic since they are the ones who
campaign against them.
The conservatives aren't going to vote for that, I don't think, and they want to cut spending, but they want to do the school funding first, and we've got moderates and specifically the Senate president who has said we're not doing anything until everybody takes their cuts. So the moderates are going to be in an awkward position of having to make cuts probably before they do the budget. That's awkward and bad for their future, I think. But
all right. Kansas City Mayor Sly James says his police department will not do the federal government's work by enforcing immigration law the feds should handle. James' comments came as President Trump was finalizing an executive order threatening to cut federal funds to so-called sanctuary cities. In case you were wondering, a sanctuary city is generally defined as one that offers safe harbor for undocumented immigrants who might otherwise be deported by federal officials. Some big city mayors, Rahm Emanuel in Chicago and New York's Bill de Blasio, vowed to ignore the president's threat. By the way, Missouri law forbids cities from assuming sanctuary status. So let's start with this. Is there a legitimate rationale for mayors to ignore directives from the nation's chief executive about sanctuary cities, which I believe are thought to be unlawful?
Yes,
And what would that be?
It's absolutely not their responsibility to enforce federal immigration laws. And I think that most mayors view it in that regard. And moreover, they have no desire to disrupt the communities of hardworking immigrants who are paying taxes and working every day and going out. Would they go out now and search for people? And
Well,
go
I
into the
don't think
communities
they're
and
asking
disrupt
the
the
city to go out and
lifestyle?
search for people who are here
Well, I mean, but-
illegally.
but
They're
they
saying
have-
if there are criminals or they're
If
suspected
there are
of crime
criminals,
and
they
you're
should
asked
be,
to help.
Well, and I think all
get them.
mayors will certainly, if they are breaking the law or engaging in illegal activities, they will address it. But to go out and pursue them and look for them, I doubt that any of them are going to do that.
Do cities have a lawful obligation, Mike, to respond when the federal government, ICE officials say, we want you to give us this guy or get this guy?
So let's talk about that. From a legal maxim standpoint, typically the federal government cannot mandate that a local government perform an activity. However, what they can do, just like what occurred with the drinking age back in the early 1980s, what they can do and what Donald Trump has done is link federal funding to activity. If you don't want to do it, you're well within your legal rights not to do it, but we're going to withhold funding. So what he's done is he's taken off the table, theoretically, not law enforcement funding, not highway funding, which would require congressional action, but education fund, health funds, and interestingly for the city of Kansas City, potentially FAA and aviation funds for airports. So that's the leverage the federal government has, and it's extraordinary. For
I think Mayor James finally said he would work with the federal government as opposed to facing the threat of losing grant funds.
Absolutely. Federal dollars are enormously important to the city of Kansas City.
Is Kansas City considered a sanctuary city?
Well, this is identity politics at its worst. Because bottom line is, you have people violating the law. Why wouldn't we want to stop it? We have crimes being committed at times. It's not going after people's houses that are living here in peace. It's people that are causing problems. So we create this undocumented, which means they're not here legally. That's an issue. It's a violation of law. If that person goes beyond that and commits actually some kind of crime, why wouldn't you go after them?
But if they're committing crimes, law enforcement's going to address it anyway. I mean, that's not
Are they?
ridiculous.
Well,
of course they are. They're not going to say, "Oh, that's an undocumented immigrant committing that crime," so we're going to turn our back on that.
Nobody's asked them to
I
go
don't think
after.
that's what they're saying. They're going to deal.
Nobody's
They're going
asked
to
them to go
fight
after
crime
peaceful
wherever
people.
it exists.
Well, they're not saying just go door to door and make people go home.
If cities were
pointless.
cooperating, Denidre, it seems to me Trump wouldn't be making this threat. It's the absence of cooperation that causes
Trump
the federal
has no
government to
idea
respond.
what's going on.
I think under the Obama administration, there was a lot of turning the other way, and I think that some of the questions you have to ask are things like minor crimes, like are they going to enforce when they pick up somebody who's smoking pot or something that
Yes.
is not a crime against other people or property? Are they going to then send them
And they're
on to,
undocumented.
and they're
Why wouldn't
undocumented?
you?
Do they send them on? And I think that has not been happening.
wouldn't
It's just
you?
been
But you
kind
don't
of-
know. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is we don't know.
What are they? What are our mayors standing? What are our mayors standing?
There's
What's the
no
mayor standing
evidence.
against?
There's no evidence.
What's the mayor
There's
standing
no
against?
evidence.
Exactly.
that
He's saying
they
I'm
have
not going to help
done
what?
it.
I mean, it's like
They mean they're not going to go out and aggressively pursue
Nobody has to
So,
do
undocumented
so
that.
that's the
immigrants.
question: is that aggressively pursuing? If you stop somebody for pot, and it would typically be a small fine and maybe no jail time, and you find
So
out they're
what you're wanting is
undocumented
for
or
every
illegal,
time someone stopped, you want us to have to produce proof of U.S.
No,
citizenship?
but in the
Is that what you're asking?
no, but
them
in the
to do?
process, if you discover the person's here illegally, why would you not deal with that?
Right. Go
That's
ahead.
all he's asking.
Can I just say this is a guy who actually enforced the law in this
Yes.
jurisdiction?
Yes, please do.
No president has done what we're talking about here.
Okay.
No
Thank
president
you.
has gone out and deported people that were picked up on minor offenses. It was an issue we dealt with back
Well,
in the 1990s.
that's not being suggested
Doesn't
now,
make it
is
right.
No,
Well, yeah.
I don't know
Doesn't
that it
mean
is,
the
but I think
president's
for
right.
someone to
That's
say
what
that this
is
is
being
Obama's
suggested.
fault,
Yeah.
George Bush didn't do it, nobody's done this. So this is an issue that has really been a
said it
national
was
issue for a long
Obama's
period of time.
fault.
Well, won't this all be resolved when the wall is built?
Well, absolutely. We know that. We're starting on that next week, too, by the
It's
way.
all around your house, Mike.
Yeah.
Now we head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes have 30 seconds each to celebrate or eviscerate people and events in the news. And we start with Denidre.
Well, this is a roast for people we actually talked about earlier. The U.S. Democrats and their allies in the last couple of weeks, they've been starting fires, turning over cars. That's protesting. That's not protesting, that's rioting. They've been dressing as body parts and carrying vulgar signs through the streets. Most normal people don't want to associate that. They've been on full-blown meltdown over the Donald Trump's appointment of his Secretary of Education. This should be an indication to Democrats that maybe that department shouldn't have as much power as it has. This country works best when we have two strong parties who can have spirited debate and meaningful and thoughtful discussion, and I'm actually mildly worried, though not sad at all, that the Democrats seem to be completely losing their way, but that's going to damage all of us if we can't have those thoughtful conversations.
Mike Sanders, who has not lost his way.
I have not lost my way. Nationally, I want to toast someone I want politics to stop, and it should stop at the national border, but William Owens, the chief petty officer who died in Yemen, in South Yemen on January 28th. It's easy, I think, in this frame of mind that we have in this country to make everything political. This was a true American hero. This is someone who did, I think, the greatest honor you can give to a soldier. When his country called, he laid his life on his line for his brothers and his country, and he's an American hero, and a major toast to him.
Gwen.
I'm locally toasting the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the other petitioners in their effort to place a proposed minimum wage increase on the ballot in April. I commend them for staying the course and prevailing in a Supreme Court case to force the city to place this initiative on the ballot. And thanks to their perseverance, this initiative will come before the electorate in April or August. We're hoping April.
All right, Ron.
I'd like to toast the new administration for standing their ground and making decisions that maybe the media didn't like, but when they were confronted, instead of backing down, they said, no, here's what we're doing. And as long as we're committed to doing the right thing, I think America's going to be well served by that approach.
All right, and finally, as much as I hate to do it, here is a roast to the Fox News Channel for not renewing the contract of columnist and commentator George Will. No reason was given, but some believe it's the result of Will's feud with Fox star Bill O'Reilly and Will's harsh criticism of President Trump. As a longtime fan of George's, I hope some other network, maybe PBS, maybe CNN, will ask him to join their pundit panels. I remain optimistic that will happen because, as we all know, where there's a will, there's a way. And that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, I'm Mike Shannon saying thanks very much for watching and good night.
Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.